This is Dr. Mark Hitchcock, another episode of Marking the Times. I want to thank you for joining us this week. There's been a lot happening out in the world, and I know a lot of you are maybe looking for some updates about the Israel treaty with Sudan and some of those things. We'll talk about those in some future episodes, but I want to talk about something that obviously we're all thinking about this week, the elections upcoming. Some of you may be tired of hearing about politics and hearing people's views about the election and voting and all those kinds of things. Others of you I know are still highly interested in what's happening, and so a lot of different pastors I know are preaching sermons related to the election. I'm not doing that specifically at our church. We're in the book of Daniel, which talks a lot about God's sovereignty and God's kingdom that's coming to this earth. It's going to give us great hope. But I want to use Marking the Times to just talk for a moment about the election coming up. I talked about it 2 weeks ago, and I said we need to vote and pray and rest. We need to vote. We need to pray for the elections. We need to rest in the results, realizing God is sovereign. But I want to talk a little bit more specifically just about the candidates and who we should vote for. I'm not going to tell you who to vote for. It's going to be pretty obvious when I'm finished who I'm voting for. But, when you look at our candidates, Donald Trump and Joe Biden, both of them are far from ideal. We all recognize that. I mean, there's probably not anyone here who would say this person's exactly who I'd love to vote for. But we have to make a choice. Those are the two candidates that we have to make a choice from. And I just want to share with you a few key factors in my decision. And as believers, we need to vote the Bible, vote biblical principles, vote our worldview. And to me, here are a few of the things that I think about. One is sanctity of life. I'll talk a little bit more about that here in a moment. Sanctity of marriage. Joe Biden's already said he's going to push through the Equality Act, and you can go read what that's all about. Protection of religious freedom, but also support for Israel. That's one I think that's forgotten many times. But it's just the whole idea of really voting a biblical worldview. I'm not going to have time to talk about all these, but I do want to talk a little bit about sanctity of life. This is something that's near to my heart and should be to the heart of every believer in Jesus Christ. I was reading an article that a man sent out here recently. I thought I'd just share with you what he says about this idea of abortion in our culture. He says, God hates hands that shed innocent blood. They're an abomination to him, Proverbs 6:16 and 17. There's nothing more evil or wicked than destroying the innocent life of a defenseless baby in a mother's womb. Those who support politicians who give women the right to murder their unborn children are complicit with those who disobey the clear commandment of God, do not murder. Abortion is morally evil and a serious capital offense that must be outlawed and punished, not condoned, excused, overlooked, or allowed. And then Genesis 9:6 says, whoever sheds man's blood, by man his blood shall be shed, for in the image of God he made man. You've heard a lot about this from a lot of pastors, I'm sure, but what's happening in our culture is a lot of people who claim to be Christians are saying, well, it's okay to vote for Joe Biden, who supports abortion all the way up to the point of birth, because Donald Trump has his own set of problems and difficulties and sins in his life. Now, what I found in reading a lot of these articles that have been written by people who profess to be Christians is they have to give long statements, pages long, to justify what they're doing in voting for Joe Biden for president. There's a group out there called Pro-Life Evangelicals for Biden, and they've released a document calling for evangelical Christians to vote for the pro-abortion candidate, Joe Biden. Billy Graham's granddaughter is part of that group. And again, I've read the article. You can get online and read it, Pro-Life Evangelicals for Biden. And you can see how they have to go through a lot of gymnastics and rationalization to get to the place they are. John Piper is a man that I have a lot of respect for in a lot of ways. Was the former pastor of a church in Minnesota. But John Piper has an article online. Again, you can get online and read that. But it's clear in there that he's going to vote for Joe Biden. That's who he's for. But he's not going to vote for President Trump primarily because he's prideful. That's basically the gist of what he says. And he says this, it's presumptuous to assume that pro-abortion policies kill more people than a culture saturating pro-self pride. Now, I really don't know what he's talking about there. To me, that makes no sense to say that someone who's a prideful person, it's presumptuous to believe that that person has killed less people than abortion has. Abortion's killed 60 million people in our culture. I do think President Trump is a prideful man, but he wants to preserve life, the life of unborn children in the womb. And here's the thing we have to make a distinction between, I think. Pride is a personal sin. We all have personal sin. Everybody who's occupied the White House has personal sin. Probably most of them are prideful. They may be greedy. They may commit adultery. They may be lustful. They may be filled with all kinds of sins. But there's a difference between the personal sins that they have and policies they enact or policies they don't enact that save lives and restrain evil in our culture. So certainly everyone in the White House has personal sin. And some of it's been egregious. But there's a big difference between that and policies they enact or policies they don't enact that in this case is killing millions upon millions of unborn children. Anyway, one final thing is support for Israel. Donald Trump has been a great supporter of Israel. He's moved the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. He's recognized Israel's right to the Golan Heights. Just this last week, brokered another peace deal between Israel and Sudan, another nation, and there's probably more to come. So he's been as good a president, anti-abortion president as we've ever had. He's been as pro-Israel a president we've ever had. And the Bible says in Genesis chapter 12, those who support Abraham and his descendants, God will bless. And those who curse them, God must curse. And so if we want to be blessed as a nation, we need to support the nation of Israel and support those who go against the death-producing policies and the freedom-limiting policies in our country. So I hope that's helpful. I know I'm probably preaching to the choir. Most of you probably agree with what I'm saying, but I think it's important for us to continue to say it and to continue to stand for this biblical worldview and these principles God has given to us. And let's be praying. Let's be voting. Let's be encouraging others to vote. And if you think this Marking the Times has been helpful, send it to somebody else if you think it could be a benefit to them. Well, thank you again for joining us today. God bless you, and I hope you have a good week.